This is the Author Blurb podcast, where readers and authors connect. We are here for you to learn and discover those authors who are not either large names or as popular as some might find, but they're entertaining, they're fun, and they're enjoyable to listen to in these interviews. So take the time, learn more about them, enjoy the interviews, and remember to go to authorblurb.com where you can find out more about them, about the shows, and other guests that we have. So this is Author Blurb, and I'm here with Jennifer Bosma. And
Yeah.
Bosma, I'm sorry, we went through this a few times before we even started recording, and I do apologize, but you have 2 children's books, you have a couple blogs going, you're very proactive in your writing, it sounds like, and as you just told me, a retired teacher, with these 2 books. Jennifer, I appreciate you being here. I'm looking forward to learning more about your books. With me having kids myself, children's books topics tend to interest me, so if you would, please tell everyone a bit about yourself so we can get to know you, and also let's talk about your books. Let's start learning a bit about them.
Great. Thank you. First of all, Eric, thank you so much for having me today. This is a lot of fun. I love talking about kids' books because that is definitely my passion. I was a teacher for 23 years, pretty much taught 3rd and 4th grade mostly. And then, I went through COVID. That didn't scare me. We went through and we did the virtual. And then really God just kind of put it on my heart that it was time to just really focus on my books, on my blog for women, and my ministry. So when I left teaching, I absolutely loved it, but I knew God had a different place for me. So I was really excited about venturing into the writing world. My first book is called The Baby Garden, and this is fun. I wrote this 26 years ago when I first started writing it. And it was basically about where babies come from. It was a story that I told my then 2-year-old, who's now 30, about where her baby sister was coming from. And it was a story I just always kind of thought about where babies come from based on Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. It's a really cute story about babies are in heaven and they get sent to their mommies and daddies. And it's pretty much written for a sibling, like that's waiting for a baby number 2 coming. So it kind of explains where babies come from for an older child. So that was my first book. And the fun part about that book is now it is in, my neighbor at the time was a volunteer at a local pregnancy center. And so when she saw the book, she goes, Jennifer, this would be great for moms to read in the waiting room. And so that has launched my ministry. In the Baby Garden is in over 300 pregnancy centers. And it's just a tool that, the consultants can give a mom who may be, thinking about, her decisions. And it's just it's really a great book to let her know that God has a plan and purpose for every baby. And that has launched. I volunteer in some pregnancy centers, local pregnancy centers as well. So that's my first book, The Baby Garden. And my second book is, the name of it is I Know the Plans. And this sweet book comes from when I first was holding my grandchild for the very first time. Mom's unloading the hospital bag, and being a teacher, you got to read a book every day.
Right.
Kids like, read a book. So I was there having a moment with my first grandchild, and I'm thinking, wow, I need to write. What book am I going to read to her? Do I read Hop on Pop? Do I go to the Dr. Seuss, or do I read Goodnight Moon? I'm having a moment. And then it occurred to me that if I could write a book with all the scriptures that I prayed over my own babies, just really powerful ones, like, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope in the future. And I'm like, I need to write a book with all of that in it. So then I wrote, I Know the Plans, and on every page, there's a powerful scripture that I prayed, and it became memory verse because I would pray it over my children, and they would learn it, and I would learn it. And then God gave me the text in a rhyme, because from being a teacher, how kids love rhyme, and
Right.
they love, finishing every, line with a rhyme. And then the illustrations, we can talk about that later too, but Beth Snyder is an amazing illustrator. And then we really thought about what kids love, and kids love animals. And then especially when we were coming to the illustration part, the whole habitats of animals. And then in the book, now we have 6 out of the 7 continents. So yeah, the cadence is really sweet, and it just kind of evolved. And this book is it's just a beautiful, it's my passion, because I wrote it a couple of years ago, and for those reasons.
Well, that sounds good. So let me dive into the baby garden first, because
Okay.
I'm a little interested in a couple things, because I have a year. I'm thinking by the time this is being recorded, she might be a year and a half. I'd say even my son, for the first couple years when everyone was using months, I'm sitting there going, he's almost a year, he's almost a year and a half. Like right now, I'm still saying he's almost 5 years old.
Right.
Actually, this Sunday he turns 5, so
Mm-hmm.
I guess we could say he's 5. But the whole thing for me is that he's when my daughter was born,
Right.
he luckily was a very loving, caring little brother or big brother and all this, but like you said, there was really not a book that stood out to us. Now, what is it about your book, Baby Garden, that if I read it to my son at the time, he would have, let's just use round numbers and say he was 4 years old.
Okay.
At 4 years old, would that book be helpful for me to read to my son, and what would it actually help him understand?
Absolutely, Eric. It would really be helpful, because I wrote from the point of view how I was telling my then 2-year-old when I was big and pregnant for my second daughter. And it talks about that they're all up in heaven, and God introduces to them their guardian angels from Psalm 91:11, that he has an angel with him. It also talks about the baby that before they come, they are taught their talents, and they have their guardian angel, and they're kind of getting ready to come to earth. And then it talks about how God sends them to their mommy's belly, and there's a beautiful illustrated picture in there. It's very, very obviously kid friendly, a sweet little
Okay.
picture of a little baby growing. And then at the end, as it progresses, and it's a little girl who's the main character, and she's talking about, I wonder if I've met my baby brother or baby sister in the baby garden. And then the baby comes, and then it talks about, one day I'll be back in heaven. And it talks about, focusing on the Bible and living your life for Jesus. And one day you'll be back there, but right now you want to live a long life here on earth, and, on earth with Psalm 91 again. So it's a beautiful book to make them understand, to help them understand that a baby is coming to them from heaven, from God to their family. And they're going to come with already set gifts and talents that God has given them before they were even born. So it's a
All right.
really sweet book for siblings. It's a great way to explain it. And it's funny, when I first wrote that in 1994, I did it snail mail. And that was before we even had a computer. And we would have the, self-addressed stamped envelopes, and we would get our letters back. So I mailed it to over 75 publishers. Oh, I went big, the big comic and the big Zondervan. Got really nice notes back. And the interesting part of that is, over the years, and I've always loved to write, that particular book never left me, for that desire and the passion to try again with it. And then in 2018, I showed my daughters it on a manuscript, like on paper. It wasn't even on my computer. And I said, I wrote this, and I really want to try to get it published again. And then they looked at it, they're like, Mom, there's nothing like this. This is amazing. And they had never seen my writing. And, they had never seen that particular manuscript. And when they saw it, like, you need to try again. And then in 1 week, it got picked up by Ambassador International. And I remember that moment for, what was it, 26 years, that growth mindset. So the point is, when God gives you a passion, or he really is speaking to you to do something, it may take 26 years, but have that growth mindset. Don't just take no from those old rejection letters in 1994 and bring it back out again and give it a try. Because when he wants something done, it doesn't leave you. So be faithful to his call and do it. And now that book got me into my second book and this ministry. And people are like, do you miss teaching? And, I miss the kids. I miss all the good components of it. I miss it. I do. But I don't miss it, because God has pulled me into something else. I have fond memories, and I left loving teaching. And that's the secret. You want to leave when you love something, but when God calls you, make that leap.
Well, and if you're doing a ministry, you also are still teaching in a way. So
Exactly.
you're just teaching in a different setting.
Right.
And
100%.
so you still love what you do, and that's a very important thing. And so what, I guess, what connection, if any, is there between your first and second book? Is there any connection, or are they just separate in themselves?
That's a great question, Eric. And they really are together. I did not know that I'm kind of doing, I have like a theme going here. The first book is about babies.
Right.
And where they come from, Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And my second book is kind of like when the baby is born. And my book, I Know the Plans, has been huge for a couple of two things. It's been huge for baby showers. Bring a book instead of a card. They all say we go to baby showers, because this book is so great because it has the rhymes, it has scriptures, and moms. I've gone to a couple mom meetings and mom workshops, and they're just like, I need to get the scripture to read for my baby, because these are the things that these scriptures are lasting. We all know, Margaret Weiss Brown with Goodnight Moon is fantastic. Good night comb, good night brush, good night nobody, good night much. But let's learn, surely goodness and love will follow you all the days of your life, and you will dwell in the house of the Lord forever, which is Psalm 23. So that has been really, so this is like the next progression from the baby garden. The baby's coming, and this is I Know the Plans, and this is God speaking. It's almost like God speaking to the child about his plans for you. And it starts, welcome to this world, sweet child of mine. I have many plans for you to shine. Each day you'll learn and grow with me, so you may live more joyfully. And then train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. That's just the first page, but that's a little snippet.
So with that being said, then what is the age group that book goes towards? Is it like still infant, toddler, or is it toddler, kindergartners, or does it go beyond? What group of children would that book go to?
I love that question. And in fact, it is going from infant babies. My little new adopted grandnephew is in the NICU, and they're reading I Know the Plans to him. And she's having all the doctors and nurses write him little messages in it. And then, so it goes from baby all the way up. I've been doing author visits in Christian preschools up to third grade. And I've been doing the whole span, the preschool. That's really like when you said about how I'm teaching differently. I am going now into preschools and to first grade, second grade. And then I would pull it in, but I have all the book characters because we have lions from Africa and coyotes and kangaroos. I have all those animals, they're plushies, the stuffed animals, and the kids all hold. So then we go in and we talk about settings with the habitats, and we talk about the characters, which are the animals. And so it really is going into, and obviously Christian schools, because it is faith-based. So, so they're really, I've been really busy. I have a couple author visits, every week I have about 2 or 3, and that's been a blessing, and people just sign up on my website. But that's been really fun. So I can put my teaching hat back on again and come in and have some fun with the kids.
Well, that sounds good. Now, it sounds like it's almost similar to the setup, at least, to a book that I have for my son, where it's like a 5-minute bedtime stories that I read to him.
Yes.
And that has a bunch of animal characters, and each story or each section is its own animal characters and stories and things like that. Am I understanding it right, that that's what yours is, or does it flow from page 1 to all the way to the end as a consistent story?
It is, the first page is Welcome to This World, and on the first page we have a little stork dropping the baby to the world, and the second page is kangaroos, and it says, trust me to lead you if I may, this will lead you to sunny days. And then those are kangaroos, so we have the habitat of Australia. And then, for instance, the third page is foxes, and that talks about your mommy and daddy I've picked for you. Listen to them, for their wisdom is true. And then it goes on to 2 more lines. And then after that, we have Africa. We have the lion's habitat. And that the lions is your family gives you so much love, which makes me smile from up above. And then it has 2 more lines as well. So it takes you, it's each page, but it talks you through your parents, your family, your talents, your life, all the places you'll go. So it does take the child on a little quick journey, but it's short enough that you're not going to lose your kid's attention span. And just last night, I received a picture of my granddaughter with my daughter reading the book as her nighttime story. And she is almost 4. You know how we round up. She's almost 4. And she was reading it herself. And this book just came out on February 7th. And my daughter started, "Your mommy and daddy," she finished the text. So it was really cute to see that it's catchy. And that's what you need for kids. They need to kind of be engaged and drawn in. If it's too much text, they're going to drift off.
Oh, yeah, trust me. And I read my kid, like I said, a good night book. So even in the middle, even before bed, I'll sit there and go, okay, finish this page here. And usually I'll choose the pages that are small text for him.
Right.
But yeah, it makes sense. You don't want to have, and I've seen some kids' book, like I bought a 5-minute book, and it was just nothing, no pictures, just all words. And I'm sitting there going, I'm not going to be able to read this to him. But yeah, that's kind of an interesting fact there. So with that, what you said that you were holding your grandchild and that's what drove you, but what actually was the spark that made you go, these are what I need to do? Because since saying I need to write a story, something so I could read to my grandchild, to my kid, whatever the circumstance is, I've heard several different people talk about how they just wrote a complete story. Like I have an outline for a kids series all about cats, and it's different adventures, different things, but they're all with themes and lessons and all this.
Right.
I just have to get around to getting the other 3 books that I have in my queue to write so I can get to those.
Right.
The whole thing is there's several different ways of going to write a story, especially for kids. You can write so many different ways. What made you decide to go that route that you did?
Great question again. Well, what I did is I wrote down all my favorite scriptures. I just kind of had a piece of paper, and if I were to write a book, which are the ones I would want to keep for future generations? So whenever I'm writing a book right now, I'm obviously writing it for my grandkids, and I want these books to last way longer than me. I plan to live a long life here on earth, but when I, go away, I want my books to stay. And so many of the things I write, these are the things I really believe as a mom and now grandma that I want to be lasting for my grandkids. So, and for all children. So I first wrote down all my favorite scriptures that I would come off my tongue. And then I wrote, okay, now what would I want to say? And that's where the welcome to this world came from. And then I almost want to tell the child what, so the book is actually written from like God's point of view to the child. Like, your mommy and daddy I've picked for you. Listen to them, for their wisdom is true. Always respect them and what they say, and this will lead you to sunny days. But I didn't first write it in rhyme. So first I just as authors, you have to the hardest part of writing a book is sitting down and writing. As you know, you just have to make time. So I sat down and I just didn't worry about editing or rhyming. And I just started writing, okay, your parents, your family. And then I would write your hobbies. I went all over there on that rough draft,
Okay.
And that was not in rhyme. So I had it all written kind of nicely packaged. And then I looked at it and with reading to your son, kids love the rhyme. They love that. Yeah. And then so I put it together and I'm like, Lord, and before I do any of this, let me just preface. I stop and I'm thinking, Lord, how do you want me to write this book? And then it was a download, do it in rhyme. I'm like, whoa. And then you get the author hesitancies, like, well, I'm not a good poet. I'm not blah, blah, blah. You get that, well, I've never written a book like this. I'd like to write poems, and then it was a download. Like, I just started going, and it was, thank you, Jesus, and the rhymes really came back. And then with the editing, with my Ambassador International editor, we were kind of going there's kind of going back and forth just with simple words like contractions when you will use you will and you'll, because you'll is only one syllable and you will is two. So then you have to, my husband and I are sitting, and I was reading it, I would be counting out the syllables on my finger. And each page has 4 lines. And you have to make the first 2 first 2 match and the second 2 match to get the cadence. So I'm talking like almost doing like a sign language with my fingers to make sure that the syllables are right. So yeah, that's how it evolved.
All right. Now, you did talk about your illustrator earlier in the show. And, that's, like I said, I've started outlining and planning for my own kids' book. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest pain in the necks is finding an illustrator that, one, you feel would be good enough to do the work and you feel comfortable with.
Right.
But usually most illustrators that I saw likes to stick to one character or one type of character to follow through. But with yours, it sounds like you have, like you said, multiple different animals, different characters in that sense. What was the process, or what was the thought process to do that, to where your illustrator felt comfortable enough to get your idea on paper?
Yes. Well, what we did is Ambassador International, my publisher, is really good about, they will find you your illustrator. And that's a big kind of a relief for people like, I'm an author. I can't draw. I attempt to draw.
Right.
Laughs at, my silly bunnies. Bunnies are easy for some reason. But so they will find you an illustrator, which is great. But they also will look into, like, if you bring them an illustrator, the publisher will also talk to them and kind of see if it's a fit, because they pretty much have the final say if they'll go with them or not. So when I knew that they were open to some ideas. So my first illustrator, Winda, she is, and she's a wonderful lady, and she is from Indonesia, and she did a great job with the baby garden. I was very pleased with her. But this one, I knew I wanted something a little bit different. And so I had a parent who was my student's mom when I was teaching, and she was just a great artist. I loved all her stuff, and she would make me things. I knew she did some books. So I talked with her. We had breakfast one morning, and I showed her my manuscript, and she's like, "This is amazing." She goes, "I don't have time right now, but I can see animals in this book." And when she said that, I was kind of thinking animals too, because animals are so great. Like we talked about, kids love animals. Mm-hmm. And this book goes through the end. We go to South America, we go to Australia, we go to Africa, we go to Asia, we go to all the continents except Antarctica. And so it's very inclusive. And kids can always relate to animals. And I love that idea too. But she said she didn't have time, but she said, check into Beth Snyder. And Beth Snyder lives in Easton, Kansas, in the Kansas City area. And I just thought that was her best friend. So I reached out to Beth on Instagram, and we started talking, and then we started talking on the phone. And she also said, I would love to get into animals, because if you look at her website, she's pretty much people. She's like, she draws a lot of people and a lot of little girls. And she had never drawn animals as an illustrator for a book. And she's like, I would love to do animals. I would love it. She was just elated to take her illustrations to the animal level. She was very excited. And so then we started talking about the continents. And actually, when I go into my author visits, we do the continent song, and I have a map, and we bring in the education part of it too. But and we started talking about the habitats, and we had one shared habitat. Her husband's a big duck hunter, and he has a big YouTube channel, very big into conservation. And so is my son-in-law as well. And so it's fun. We have a little duck habitat, a mallard habitat. That's kind of the tie-in for author illustrator with her family in mind. So we have some cute little, tie-ins like that. But yeah, so she just ran with it, and she loved it. And her illustrations, I had one little suggestion on the panda's eyes, and she's like, "Oh yeah, done." She didn't even need to tweak it. It was beautiful. The illustrations are captivating. Really good.
Well, that sounds like you got very lucky and got a good illustrator there. So, things like that do tend to make the books more interesting when you're reading to the kid, that they want to look at the pictures as well, because it does help keep their attention.
Yes.
like I said, well, and like we stated, I've go through books all the time, reading to my kid, and if it's a book that doesn't have good imagery, good things like that, the kids are just going to be like, okay, well, I'll crawl into bed.
Right.
So,
Correct.
so
Yes.
I mean, yeah, that sounds really good. I mean, and then do you have another book planned out? Do you have what else do you have coming? Because it sounds like to me, from what I'm gathering from you, is this is kind of just the start. You seem to have a plan to keep going. Now, I could be mistaken, but is that what I'm understanding properly?
100%, Eric. Yes, it really is. Actually, yes, the theme, and I already have two manuscripts that I've kind of written, and I'm kind of playing with those, but I think I'm going to be doing something brand new. But it is going to go with the whole theme, like you said, the baby gardens, babies. And
Mm-hmm.
then this one's, I know the plans, like for your young, baby growing up, start speaking that word, preschool, elementary. And I have a couple ideas. So I have written two, but I think I'm gonna not use those, and I'm going with my third idea. So right now I'm in that stage that we mentioned, the writing down, just the typing down, and just finding the time to sit and write. And I have a couple big chunks of stories already going. And as an author, and for you too, when you're writing, just get it down and then come back. I would tell my students this too, my fourth graders, don't worry about crossing out. We don't worry about editing, because once you get on that road, you're like, oh, that sentence is terrible. No, just keep piling on, just keep writing, let it cool, and then come back to it and look. And then God may give you fresh eyes to do something different. And then eventually, one of the little stories will kind of bubble to the top. It's like that one. So I'm still looking for that one moment. That's the one I'm going to take the next level. But I like I said, two are kind of done. Not sure about those, if I'm going to run with those. But the ones I'm percolating right now are
Mm-hmm.
going to be coming up to my third. And yes, I do plan to keep going. Thank you.
Well, that sounds good. Now, you also talked in your profile you've given me in the little bit of information we've discussed. You also have a blog. I think it's 4 different blogs. Did I understand that right?
Yes.
Where it's focused on different topics. Do you mind discussing that a little bit? Because most people that I found that gets into children's books do like to know the authors and learn more about what they have going on. So,
Right.
what are your blogs covering?
Excellent. Yes. My website name is quite easy. It's www.jenniferbosma.com. And on that I have the tiles on the top, author visit, about my books. There's places on that to order from myself. You can order from me, which I can inscribe and write to if there's a baby coming. That's my little feature that Amazon can't do, or Barnes and Noble. I can just write a personal, because I do have a small supply of books at my home. So I can personalize a book if there's someone that they would prefer that. So I can mail them up from that way. So I, of course, have the store part. But however, what's really started with all that is I do have 3 blogs for women. One of them is 1 Minute Mama. And 1 Minute Mama is 1 minute to read. And it's kind of the mentoring that I have for young women. I have 3 daughters myself, and my oldest is a mom of 2. I have 2 granddaughters. So I'm always kind of like, as a grandma mom, I'm always mentoring to her and her friends, and just giving the things I've learned from a mom perspective. So this is really uplifting for moms, like, some topics, about your children. And like I just wrote one a couple weeks ago about when you see the time on your clock, like if you see the time on your clock and it symbolizes a birthday, then, when I see 9/17, that's my oldest daughter's birthday. So I can, I say a prayer for her. If I see my anniversary date, I pray for my husband and I. So it's really kind of fun. Whenever I see a date that's a time, that's like my trigger to pray for them. So that was one of my 1 Minute Mama things. Hey, you want to beef up your prayer life? We all want to pray more. You can do a really quick little prayer just by seeing that person. The time on your phone can trigger into an important event for you. Pray for that person involved. That was an example of my 1 Minute Mama. And then I have my Front Parking Spot blog. And Front Parking Spot are my really big takeaways. Those are my big spiritual moments that I have. I'm going to be writing one very shortly about the words that you speak, the words from your mouth. And it's kind of like what I've learned as a a Christian woman through my years, and some big kind of like biblical takeaways that I have implemented in my life. And so my front parking spot is, for instance, the name. When my children were little, I had all three of them, pushing to an amusement park. And instead of they were funneling everyone to the back spots. And with 3 kids, that's a lot to get to the gate.
Right.
And you could go wherever. I'm like, well, I'm going to go check out and see if there's any available in the front. And sure enough, there were 3 open spots in the front. And that's where my front parking spot mentality arrived. And that so many times we as people, we settle for the back row because everyone's going there. But what does God have for you? And if you go to the front parking spot, 8 times out of 10, you'll find a spot. So that's become my motto in my life, and all my girls know. We use that front parking spot when they were growing up for colleges. Any life decisions, like what's the front parking spot? Are you settling by going to the back, or do you want to look and go to the front just to see if anything's open there? So that's become my life kind of mantra for my life. And so the front parking spot has big spiritual takeaways in that blog. And the third one is Words for Wednesday. And I love photography. My daughter she is the one who inspired that. She's the major photographer in the family. But now I've kind of taken along, I take a pretty picture, and then I've been learning Photoshop, which is a whole, you can't be afraid to learn new things when you're out there on this web world.
Right.
Then I take my other favorite scriptures, because, you can read the Bible every day and new scriptures will pop out on you that speak to you at the moment. And then I've learned to type up the scriptures and place them over the pictures in Photoshop. So those are my 3. And that's active, updated every week on Wednesdays. So that's kind of, and then, I have my author visit signups there and pictures. And so it's a very involved website, www.jenniferbosma.com. So that's where that is. Yeah.
Well, that sounds perfect. And it sounds like that's a great place for people to reach out to you. So, yes. I mean, I have, like I said, a profile of you on authorblurb.com where there are a lot of your information there, your social medias and your website. And anyone that wants to find this video again, of course, the video is going to be in your profile too. But with everything said, it sounds wonderful. It sounds like you have great books already out and more to come. I'm looking forward to it. I might personally just get I have a plan for my kids. Yeah. So that will be exciting to go through with them. So thank you, Jennifer, for being here. It's been very fun and very intriguing to talk with you. I've enjoyed it. I'm going to have you hold on for me for just a moment, and then we're going to keep talking, but this is going to be the end of the conversation for everybody else.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate the time, and you can follow me also on Instagram at Front Parking Spot, hence the Front Parking Spot name on Instagram, and that has all my book updates as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You can go to authorblurb.com where there's plenty of stuff there for you to find. Enjoy another author. Enjoy finding that book that you love. So take the time, do me a favor, share, subscribe, enjoy the show, and tell others. Thank you.